It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria, the last edition of The World Today in 2024. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. The island nation of Kiribati, New Zealand and Australia take the lead, becoming the first to enter into 2025. Jeju Air boss says no safety issues were flagged in pre-flight checks before one of its planes crashed in South Korea. And tears and hugs as Ukrainian prisoners reunite with their families following a prison swap with Russia. Let's begin The World Today. Pictures from New Zealand and Australia, one of the first few countries to enter into 2025 before Nigeria, which will enter into the new year in just a few hours. Kiribati, however, a small island nation in the Pacific, often takes the lead, becoming the first to welcome the new year. Countries in the South Pacific, including Tonga, Samoa and Fiji, are also making the arrival of the year. Also already reeling in the New Year celebrations alongside New Zealand are Australia, with major cities including Sydney and Melbourne lighting the sky with fireworks. Much of Asia, including Japan, South Korea and China, are welcoming the start of 2025 as we speak, Asia being 6 to 7 hours ahead of Nigeria. Meanwhile, the UK and much of Europe will be entering into 2025 either at the same time with Nigeria or an hour later. Some New Year celebrations have been cancelled, however, in the UK due to bad weather conditions issued by the Met Office. While there are 39 time zones across the globe, it takes 26 hours for the entire world to welcome the new year. To present realities now in South Korea, acting President Choi Sang-mok has presided over a cabinet meeting in the capital Seoul, a country still reeling from the impact of the plane crash on Sunday. To politics, Mr. Choi announced he would be filling in vacancies in the judicial sector by appointing constitutional court justices in a bid to end the political uncertainty and social conflict in the country as soon as possible. Mr. Choi, who was the finance minister at the time, became acting president after the impeachment of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. He immediately appointed two constitutional court justices, Jong Ye-son and Chon Han-chang, indicating a third would be appointed when the ruling and opposition parties agree on nominating a candidate. South Korea's constitution requires 6 judges to agree on the ouster of an impeached president. But the 9-member court had 3 vacancies. However, the current justices would have had to vote unanimously to remove President Yoon Suk-yeol. In the meantime, supporters of South Korea's impeached and suspended President Yoon Suk-yeol have taken to the streets near his official residence in Seoul, as coming after the court approved his warrant of arrest today, waving placards, South Korean and U.S. flags. The protesters rallied to show their support for the embattled president. They also expressed opposition to the arrest warrant, which investigators examining Mr. Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law had asked for. Mr. Yoon was suspended from presidential powers after being impeached by Parliament over his decision to briefly impose martial law on December 3rd. He's also facing criminal investigation into possible insurrection charges. It's the first ever arrest warrant that's been issued for an incumbent president in South Korea. To the updates now on the plane crash that happened on Sunday in South Korea. Jeju Air boss Kim Yi-bae says no safety issues were flagged in pre-flight checks before one of its planes crashed at one international airport. He pledged, however, to repair trust by strengthening safety measures as investigators begin their probe. Meanwhile, South Korean acting President Choi Sang-myok visited Seoul Memorial to pay tributes to the victims of the crash. Choi was accompanied by a group of officials as he laid flowers and bowed to his last respects. The acting president ordered an emergency safety inspection of the country's entire airline operation as investigators work to identify victims and find out what caused the disaster. To Europe now, Russia has launched several groups of Shahids towards Ukraine, hitting Kyiv in a New Year's Eve attack. According to a preliminary investigation, missile debris fell on a private building in one of the capital's districts, but there was no fire, damage, nor human casualties. In a separate incident, a Russian missile attack hit unidentified infrastructure in the town of Shoska in the northern Sumy region. Kyiv City Military Administration reports that its air defense systems repelled a Russian attack early this morning. But the air is off to a fine start for prisoners of war reunited after being released in a major swap between Ukraine and Russia. The reunion happened on Monday. Kyiv brought home 189 former captives, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky thanked the United Arab Emirates and other partners for facilitating the swap. The Russian Defense Ministry reported earlier Monday the prison swap, saying each side had freed 150 prisoners of war. There was no immediate explanation of the discrepancy in the numbers reported. President Zelensky, however, said the returning Ukrainians included soldiers, surgeons, and officers from different frontline areas, and also 2 civilians who had been captured in the southern port of Mariupol, taken by the Russian troops in 2022. We're in the Middle East now. Yemen's Houthi group says it targeted Ben Gurion Airport near Tel Aviv and a power station south of Jerusalem using a hypersonic ballistic missile and Zulfikar ballistic missile, respectively. The Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Sareh claimed in a televised statement the missiles successfully hit their target. The Israeli military announced it had intercepted a missile fired from Yemen, prompting sirens to sound across the country. The Houthis would not end attacks on Israel, according to Mohammed al-Houthi, the head of the Houthi Supreme Revolutionary Committee, after the Israeli military announced the missile interception. And a response from Israel, the ambassador to the United Nations issued what he called a final warning to Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi militants to halt those missile attacks on Israel, saying that they risk the same, in his words, miserable fate as Hamas, Hezbollah, and Syria's Bashar al-Assad if they persist. Danny Danon also warned Tehran that Israel has the ability to strike any target in the Middle East, including in Iran, adding that Israel would not tolerate attacks by Iranian proxies. Houthis have repeatedly fired drones and missiles towards Israel in what they describe as acts of solidarity with Palestinians under Israeli fire in Gaza.
Let me make one thing absolutely clear. We have had enough. Israel will not stand by, waiting for the world to act. We will defend our citizens, no matter how far the threat. For those who remain silent when our schools and playgrounds are attacked, do not call for de-escalation when we respond. Do not equate those who launch missiles to murder with those who protect their people. And also, we will not expect much from the UN but the calls for restraint will not be accepted. Israel will defend its people. If 2,000 kilometers is not enough to separate our children from the terror, let me assure you, it will not be enough to protect their terror from our strengths. And for conclusion, I'm saying to the leadership of the Houthis, I have a message for you today. Perhaps you have not been paying attention to the lessons of this past year. Let me remind you what happened to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to Assad, and to all those who sought to destroy us. This is not a threat. It is a promise. You will share the same miserable fate.
Attacks in Israel and Yemen, as well as in the Red Sea, are of grave concern. Further military escalation could jeopardize regional stability with adverse political, security, economic, and humanitarian repercussions. Millions in Yemen, Israel, and throughout the region would continue to bear the brunt of escalation with no end.
Temperatures have been dropping in Gaza, raising more health concerns for people living there. Intense cold and heavy rain across the enclave in previous days have made living miserable. Babies are dying now of hypothermia. 6 Palestinian babies in the last few days following exposure of cold over the recent days, according to doctors. In the second winter of the war in Gaza, the weather has added an extra element of suffering to hundreds of thousands of people already displaced, often multiple times, while efforts to agree a ceasefire go nowhere. Around the area, dozens of tents, many already tattered from months of use, have been blown away or flooded by the strong winds and rain, leaving families struggling to repair the damage, patching torn sheets of plastic and piling up sand to hold back the water. It's another aspect of the humanitarian crisis facing Gaza's 2.3 million population, caught by the relentless Israeli campaign against remnants of Hamas and dependence on the erratic aid system, increasingly vulnerable to looting as order has broken down in Gaza. Well, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today returned to duty in the Knesset to vote for a government tax bill. It will be his first public appearance since he underwent a successful prostate removal surgery on Sunday. The Prime Minister left Hadassah Ein Kerem Hospital, where he was receiving the treatment against doctors' advice. Local media reports that members of parliament discussed a budget bill that some parties threatened not to pass. Let's bring in the VOA's Ricky Rosson now. She's in Tel Aviv. Ricky, great to see you. Compliments of the season. Let's begin with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's health. On Sunday, he underwent surgery for prostate cancer. He's already back in office. How is he doing, really?
Well, actually, it was not prostate cancer. It was a more routine medical procedure to remove the prostate. But he defied doctors' orders and left the hospital after just one night in order to return to the Knesset and vote for a budget measure that was feared that it wouldn't pass without his support because the two far right-wing parties were threatening to not vote for the budget measure because of disputes about what it included and didn't include. But otherwise, he left the Knesset after the vote. He was accompanied by his personal physician, and it's unknown whether he's returning home or returning to the hospital as his doctors recommended.
I wonder what Israelis think of this. The country, however, seems to be less bothered about the state of Mr. Netanyahu's health and more concerned about national issues of national importance, one of which is Yemen's attack on the Ben Gurion International Airport. Tell us more about these strikes that happened at the airport and if there were any casualties.
Well, they've been pretty incessant. Over the last 10 days, there were 13 attacks by the Houthis, rockets and drones. They haven't been particularly successful, especially in the last few days. They did force Ben Gurion Airport to close for half an hour, even though there was no imminent danger of a rocket attack. The last night there were sirens, as they have been almost every night in the last 2 weeks, and the Houthi rocket was intercepted before it actually entered Israeli airspace. And in the last 2 weeks, there have been very few casualties except for people running in the middle of the night for shelter. One attack, the rocket was intercepted and pieces of it fell in the Tel Aviv area and seriously wounded a child. Otherwise, it's mostly been disruption of Israeli routine, especially in the middle of the night.
And it does seem like, these attacks by the Yemeni Houthis were a retaliation for Israel strikes in previous months as a result of the attacks by Hamas on Israel in October. But it sounded very brazen of the Houthis to go ahead and attack Israel without considering that there will be repercussions. I mean, going by what the Israeli ambassador to the UN said, it's not a threat, it is an assurance that Israel will retaliate these attacks and the repercussions will be graver than what the Houthi attackers have done in Israel.
Actually, the Israeli attacks against Yemen have been in response to they did not initiate attacks on the Houthis and Yemen military targets. They were in response to the rocket and drone attacks that were coming from Yemen. And Israel maintains that the only reason that the Houthis have increased their attacks is because they see that the other Iranian proxies in the area, Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, have been seriously weakened over the last more than a year of war with Israel. And the Houthis are the one remaining proxy that can still carry out attacks. But not only the Israelis have responded to the Houthi attacks against Israel, the U.S. also bombed Yemen targets because of Houthi attacks against U.S. and European ships in the Red Sea.
It is, well, we have come to the end of the year of 2024. Israel's been trying to negotiate the release of hostages seized by Hamas on October 7. Has there been any word regarding how the negotiations are going and what people can look forward to in the new year?
The hostage deal negotiations are up and down, and we can only rely on rumors that come out of the negotiations. Each side is being blamed. Hamas supposedly has refused to release in the first phase the 34 alive hostages that they promised to release, saying that they won't release young men who are alive. And at the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, has stalled negotiations by saying that Israel will definitely return to resume fighting the war in Gaza.
I need to apologize. We seem to have lost signals with Ricky. Ricky is back, I'm being told. Ricky, we lost you for a few seconds there, but I think I get the understanding of what exactly you're saying. I just wanted you to address this issue of, the deaths in Gaza that have happened over the last few days, especially of, babies who are dying of hypothermia in Gaza because Israel still prevents aid and medicine from getting into Gaza. Is the Israeli government concerned at they seeing these pictures? I mean, we had a video of a man who was holding his dead baby. That can only be really heartbreaking for anyone to watch. Is that the same images? Are those the same images you're seeing in Israel? Are they the same images that you're seeing on your TV screens? And how do people feel about this? And what has the government said?
I think for the people of Israel, I think it is beyond tragic to see what's happening and to know that it could be prevented if enough humanitarian aid gets through. But the leader and the political are another course. They're denying that the humanitarian problems in Gaza are the fault of Israel. They are insisting that humanitarian aid is going through the Israeli checkpoints and that the problem is a matter of distribution inside Gaza. And they keep on insisting that there's nothing more that Israel can do. But it's impossible to turn away from these images, and it's only bound to get worse because as the rains are intensifying, as the winter is here already, tents are being flooded, more children will be dying of malnutrition, dehydration, and unfortunately even freezing to death.
A really grave situation in Gaza. Ricky, you've done your best to explain that. Let's hope help comes to them soon. We all hope for an end to the Israel-Gaza war, or Hamas war, as some prefer to call it. Thank you again for speaking with us, and compliments of this season. We'll see you in 2025.
I hope so. I hope it'll be a better year.
We do hope so as well. Welcome back. And tributes still pouring in for late U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who died on Sunday at the age of 100. People in New York City have spoken about their experience with him and the man he was.
I am so in awe of him. I'm in awe of his presidency because he was the one who fought for the environment, civil rights, but afterwards his books that he wrote, especially on the Mideast, were tremendous. I get chills when I talk, when I think about the Camp David Agreement.
He definitely struggled a lot as a one-term president, but I think that his bigger legacy is what he did and what he could show you could do if you continue working and acting honestly as a person.
I think President Carter was one of the most influential presidents that we had, especially back in the mid-'70s. It was an economical disaster going on because I was 6 years old when he was elected. By '77, he was all over the place, and then he was trying to take care of the Iran situation with the hostages. I remember that in 1979. I was 9 that year.
I always thought he was a great president because after his presidency, he started, he probably was doing it before time. He was doing a lot of building houses and stuff like that with his wife. He still was active with trying to help people. So I always looked at him always as a great president,
He was the first president I ever voted for. However, he was the last Democrat. I don't know if you're going to want to use that. Anyways, yeah, it's a sad day. He was a great humanitarian. He set an example for all of us, and we're going to miss him.
Actually, I look at it as an opportunity to learn more about him and his life, and, I think a lot of the policy that he was involved with that I wasn't aware of, and also just kind of the economics and history of that time. So I always think that we learn a lot from history because it translates a lot to present day.
At the UN Security Council on Monday, a minute of silence was held in Jimmy Carter's honor. Before rising to observe the silence, Deputy U.S. Ambassador Dorothy Camille Scheer read a statement on behalf of the Council.
On behalf of the members of the Security Council, I should like to pay tribute to James Earl, or Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States of America, who passed away yesterday at the age of 100. President Carter was a peacemaker who worked tirelessly and effectively in support of conflict mediation, the furtherance of human rights, and the strengthening of democracy, both while he was in office and during his many years of service thereafter. The members of the Security Council convey their deepest sympathy to President Carter's family and to the government and people of the United States. I would ask all in the chamber now to rise and join in a minute of silence in memory of President Jimmy Carter.
Germany's Interior Minister Nancy Faeser has promised a complete investigation into the Magdeburg Christmas market attack after a special session of the Interior Parliamentary Committee lasting around 4 hours. Faeser said every stone is being turned over. Due to thousands of tweets and online messages, Faeser said the investigation is still ongoing and says it's too early to draw any conclusions. She says the state of Saxony-Anhalt, where the attack happened, had informed the members of the Bundestag about the current status. A few days before Christmas, a man from Saudi Arabia drove a car into a crowd of people in Magdeburg. 5 people were killed and over 200 more injured. Faeser said her thoughts were with the victims, adding the motive of the perpetrator was not yet clear, but there was a clear intention to kill. Faeser emphasized that the laws had already been tightened. In addition, the draft budget for 2025 includes an additional $1 billion for security authorities. Authorities in El Salvador say they have confiscated a haul of 1.5 tons of cocaine, valued at $37.5 million, during a maritime operation off the country's coast. 2 men aboard an Ecuadorian-flagged speedboat were arrested and are set to face legal proceedings. Salvadoran Defense Minister René Merino Monroy reported that the seized narcotics were worth $37.5 million. In 2024, El Salvador has so far intercepted 16.7 tons of cocaine in high-sea operations with an estimated value of $417.7 million. India's space agency on Monday launched its first space docking mission on an Indian-made rocket in an attempt to become the 4th country to achieve the advanced technological feat. The mission, seen as pivotal for future space endeavor, including satellite servicing and the operation of India's planed space station, lifted off from India's main spaceport at 4:30 p.m. GMT aboard ISRO's Workhouse PSLV rocket. After around 15 minutes, the mission director called the launch mission successful after the spacecraft reached an altitude of around 480 kilometers. In-space docking technology is crucial when multiple rocket launches are required to achieve shared mission objectives. Venezuela's Supreme Court of Justice has announced the social network TikTok would be fined $10 million for failing to prevent the spread of viral challenges that have harmed minors. Venezuela's president of the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice, Tania D'Amelio, said TikTok failed to implement the necessary measures to stop the spread of dangerous challenges, and the imposed fine of $10 million to be settled within 8 days of the publication of the court's decision. In November, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro accused TikTok of being responsible for the spread of viral challenges that killed 2 teenagers and called for the implementation of a law mimicking the Australian ban of social media for minors. One of the strongest stories we brought to you in 2024 was the first conjoined twins conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. It was attended by experts from around the world who shared thoughts and ideas on separation of conjoined twins. Professor of Pediatric and Neurosurgery at Great Ormond Street Hospital in the UK, Dr. Owais Jilani, in an interview with me on the sidelines of the conference, addressed the issue of the rising rate of occurrence of conjoined twins in the world and the challenges it poses to both doctors, patients, and caregivers. Dr. Julani, why are there seemingly increased cases of conjoined twins recently?
It's a very interesting question that we've all been asking. You know, the two possibilities are that for unknown reasons, more children are being born conjoined. That's a possibility, but we think what's more likely is that more of these children are surviving and coming to medical attention. And so we're seeing an increased focus on these complex cases, so it feels that the incidence is higher. It's probably the same as before. It's just that now we have a spotlight on these children.
Would you consider every separation a success story?
No, for sure. It's, you know, we set up a foundation about 7 years ago called Gemini Untwined to really look at this question and focus on these children. And one of our key messages is that survival alone does not constitute success. I think with the tools and technologies that medical sciences has now, we need to be able to say that there is a very good chance of a good functional outcome for both children. And then we go ahead and execute the surgery. And at the end of it, if we have 2 functioning kids, that is what we would call success. Pure survival on children that have severe disabilities for the rest of their life, I'm not sure we can call that success anymore. Historically, you know, we can look back. For me, that is not success. But I suppose it's difficult to comment on what happened 30, 40 years ago. But certainly in the current day and age, we would not call that success.
I noticed with many of the children who came up to the stage, a lot of them, even though they were separated, but you know, they ended up with disabilities that are lifelong. I mean, they'll forever be dependent on others.
It's very difficult in many respects, sort of physically, emotionally, financially for the families. And so what's really key is for us to collate all the knowledge that we have, our foundation, the Saudi program here and others, to really understand which cases should we be separating and which cases are better left unseparated. Because there are examples of conjoined twins that have not been separated that seem to be leading happy, fulfilling lives. So, you know, it's not that every case has to be separated, and that risk analysis has to be done very carefully. People often focus on the surgery, the technical aspects. The surgery is not that difficult. You know, if you're a well-trained surgical team, you can execute these surgeries. The interesting question, and the more important question, is the decision-making. Which sets should we do? Which sets are better left untouched? And when we decide to do them, how we do it? Which specializations do you have around? The multidisciplinary team is key.
What happens when conjoined twins are diagnosed in the womb?
Yes, so we've had cases where the diagnosis has happened when the babies were still fetuses in the mother's womb. Our role at that point is to be as honest and as open with the family in terms of what the future holds. What are the chances of these children being born without any complications? What are the risks to the mother? What are the risks to the children? And after they're born, what do we expect in terms of life expectancy? And we need to give all of this information to the families because, like I said, there are some cases that separation is relatively straightforward with minimal morbidity. So you tell the family, look, this is how the journey is going to be in the first year, but I think there's a good chance we can separate your children and so on and so forth. But equally, other sets, we can tell from in utero that this is going to be a surgical challenge and probably not a good outcome. And again, you share that with the family. So our role is to be the advisors in terms of giving the information, but the final decision clearly rests with the parents, the mother in particular.
Saudi Arabia claims to have many success stories. What do you think other countries can learn from them?
Yeah, I mean, the Saudi program is commendable. They've made a really concerted effort over the past 30 years, and they've got a very large case series, so, you know, very pleased to see that. The focus now really has to be, of all the people that are doing this work, looking at the outcomes. So it's not just survival, as we discussed. What is the outcome that we're delivering for these children? So what I recommend, what I'm advocating for, is collaborative effort to look at where these children are when they're 5, 10, 18. Are we really delivering the outcomes that we hope to be delivering? And learn from that experience. So yes, we've had successes in the past, we've made mistakes in the past, but how can we minimize and stop making those mistakes again? How can we refine our thinking and our decision making? I think that is the challenge that we all face at the moment, and my emphasis, my focus is very much on that. How do we make sure that we operate on the right cases and not all cases?
Have you learned anything new in this conference?
It's good to see colleagues doing work, and one of the things which I find quite interesting is they've learned lessons in isolation that we've learned in isolation. And it would be much better if we were all working collaboratively together, so we don't have to make those mistakes individually and learn lessons. We can learn from each other's lessons. So I think collaboration is the key here. These are rare cases, and we really need to think of the global community as one, a global collaborative effort to help these children, their families, and their healthcare professionals. That is what I'd like to see more of.
Staying on the continent of Africa, a student activist who was detained in the Ugandan capital Kampala following protests against the French-backed East African crude oil pipeline is urging the government of Uganda to listen to the people rather than arrest them. Maktoum Kajubi from Kiambongo University was one of 21 reportedly arrested at a protest in August. Mr. Kajubi, alongside other activists and rights groups, are claiming lack of proper compensation for those living in the land needed for the pipeline. They also allege environmental damage and human rights violations. Mr. Kajubi referred to EU opposition to the French-backed project. The 1,445-kilometer, $4 billion pipeline is set to carry 230,000 barrels of oil per day from the west of Uganda to a Tanzanian port. A French company, Total, holds the majority 65% stake, while Uganda and Tanzania hold 15% each. China's National Offshore Oil Corporation holds the last 5%. And in Nigeria, the wife of the Lagos State Governor, Dr. Ibijoke Sanwo-Olu, has announced Mrs. Glory Nwankwo from the Ekpe Division of Lagos State, Nigeria, as winner of the Lagos edition of the Every Home a Garden competition. Mrs. Nwankwo, who emerged winner out of 152 participants, made it to the grand finale, received 2.5 million naira in cash. Mrs. Sanwo-Olu also announced a cash prize of 500,000 naira for each of the 4 winners with the best gardens from the remaining 4 divisions in Lagos, and pledged 100,000 naira to each of the 152 finalists.
In August 2024, the First Lady of Nigeria, Mrs. Oluremi Tinubu, launched a nationwide initiative called Every Home a Garden. The initiative is targeted at women who, as first-time farmers, engage in home gardening in order to promote food sufficiency in Nigeria. 5 months down the line, winners have emerged across the 36 states of the Federation, and the overall winner is from Borno State, who receives 20 million naira.
Winner of the Renewed Hope Initiative #Every Home a Garden competition is Mrs. Veronica Kidafa Mbaya from Borno State. Congratulations to our winner. Congratulations.
Here in Lagos, participants of the Home a Garden competition converge on the Lagos House Banquet Hall, Alausa, Ikeja, for the presentation of checks to the winners of the Renewed Hope Initiative towards a better life for families.
This remarkable program brought by our mommy, Mother of the Nation, and the First Lady of Federal Republic of Nigeria, Her Excellency, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, CON, has created a value chain of food sufficient for majority of women in our society.
The State Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Mr. Gbenga Omotosho, and his counterpart from the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Systems commend the federal government for coming up with such an initiative and encourage Lagos residents to imbibe the culture of farming for sustainable food production.
Many people didn't pay attention to agriculture. Today, they are paying attention. I do not know of any home Now, where people are not talking about how to plant something, tomatoes, vegetables, a way to like that woman who came up just now has just spoken. So for us, in my own view, personally, it's not just about Naira and Kobo. It's not about who wins the competition. It's not about how many people participated. But it's about the kind of interest that this program has generated. So for me, it's just thank the First Lady of Nigeria for bringing about this program. And not just bringing about the program, but supporting it in a very passionate manner.
Pray for a more food secure Lagos, and we are hoping that by next year, which is just in a few days' time, this 2025, you will be part of those who will be supplying our food hubs and selling to our consumers. So be a part of that dream of Mr. Governor of making Lagos more food secure. And thank you for participating in this program. God bless you.
Wife of the governor of Lagos State, Dr. Ibijoke Sanwo-Olu, presents a check of 1 million naira to the overall winner in Lagos, while others from Ikorodu, Lagos Island, Badagry and Ikeja receive 500,000 naira each.
152 made the grand finale. And we will be giving the consolation prizes to the 152 at this grand finale, and they will be receiving 100,000 each. This is just a way of us showing appreciation to you all and encourage you to sustain the home gardening passion. Learn, unlearn, relearn. Please be the trainer, train the trainer, encourage more women out there.
Some of the winners say the initiative has helped reduce out-of-pocket expenses, particularly on foodstuff.
Home gardening is the way to go now. We can't be shouting there's hunger in the land. Meanwhile, we have opportunities all around us. You have to come on board. You have to do something. You have to get busy. Don't just wait for others to farm, to grow these crops for you to consume. You also have to come on board. Do something in your own little corner, your own little way. Contribute to food security.
Most of the time I don't need to buy tomatoes. I just go into my garden and I pluck them. I go into my garden to pluck my okra, my ewedu, my spinach, my St. Leaf instead, everything, and it's something that I intend to, take on.
The Lagos State government, under the office of the First Lady of Lagos State, has promised to sustain the Every Home a Garden competition in order to ensure food security in Lagos.
New York City's Mayor Eric Adams and Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch have spoken about the safety measures they're planning to implement today for the New Year celebrations in Times Square. Tisch says there are no specific credible threats to the Times Square New Year's Eve celebration. Roughly 1 million people will participate in the New Year's Eve celebrations in person. Many more will watch the transmission on television and online. World Health Organization Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus has released a New Year video message in which he focuses on peace and health security in areas of conflict. Recounting a near-miss ordeal during Israeli strikes in Yemen's Sana'a International Airport on December 26, the WHO Director General said the attack demonstrated the threat faced by humanitarian workers in war zones throughout the world.
During Christmas week, I was in Yemen on a United Nations mission to negotiate with the country's de facto authorities for the release of detained UN staff and other humanitarians. The talks with the Houthis proceeded positively, and we hope they will bear fruit. While waiting to board our flight in Sana'a, the airport came under aerial bombardment by Israel. The attack inflicted needless death, injury, panic, chaos, and damage, and was another reminder of the growing threat faced by civilians, humanitarians, and health workers in war zones around the world. This must stop. With a new year upon us, our leaders must bring desperately needed peace to the world and health and safety to all. Peace and health are linked. from Gaza to Sudan, Yemen to Ukraine, and Haiti and beyond, peace is and will always be the best medicine for the health and well-being of all people everywhere.
Chinese leaders attended 2025 New Year Gala featuring traditional operas. This happened on Monday evening in Beijing. President Xi Jinping and other party and state leaders, including Li Qiang, Zhao Leji, Wang Yuning, Kai Chi, Ding Zhuixiang, Li Jing, and Han Zheng, watched the show at the National Center for the Performing Arts alongside people from all walks of life in Beijing. The show featured excerpts of classic operas that illustrate heroism and a love for China, as well as works highlighting contemporary ethos and vibrant ethnic cultures.
欢乐喜庆的器乐演奏，百花满园迎新春，拉开整场晚会的序幕。
And China and many countries in Asia are getting ready to enter into the new year in just a few minutes. They will be. But that was our last edition of The World Today in 2024. Thank you for letting us into your homes and into your lives. We'll see you in 2025, but we leave you now with pictures of New Year celebrations in New Zealand and Australia.